All right, welcome to another deep dive. This time we're going to look at an article about a statue
Okay.
of King Leopold II.
Yeah.
It's in Ostend, Belgium,
Yeah.
and it's about, well, there's this whole debate about a proposed addition to it.
Right.
But the author of the piece we're looking at actually thinks they should put up something entirely different.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, and I thought it was really fascinating how this whole local issue ties into these bigger questions about national identity
Oh, yeah.
and how we view history.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And even like comparing things back to ancient Rome and Egypt, it's kind of wild.
It really is. It's like a captivating look at how one piece of public art can just spark this conversation
Totally.
that spans centuries and continents. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, okay, let's kind of set the scene a little bit. So the statue of King Leopold II,
Right.
it's a big equestrian statue, right?
Yeah.
And it's in this place called Dry Gapers,
Okay.
which means, if you translate it, means three gapers.
Mm.
And so the former city government, they wanted to add a new artwork to it
Hmm.
to kind of provide more context.
Okay. Yeah.
And they came up with 11 different options,
Wow.
which they put out there for public consideration.
Okay.
But the interesting thing is, and this is kind of what caught my attention, is that the author, the author wasn't actually satisfied with any of them.
Oh, wow.
Not even the one that won, which was a piece by Hugh Locke.
Interesting. So why did they think that?
Well, they basically said that it didn't really address, all the complexities of Leopold II's legacy.
Oh, I see. Which is a pretty big thing to consider.
Totally. Like, you can't just kind of gloss over the
I
past.
just ignore it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's there.
It's there. So, and this is where it gets really interesting. The author, they start reflecting on this trip they took to Rome,
Okay.
and they were just like blown away by
Right.
like the Romans just had this profound like connection to their city's history,
Oh.
the civic pride.
Yeah.
And it was like reflected in the way they cared for their city
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
for each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like they were like looking for that same feeling in Belgium.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's what I got from it too. They're searching for those tangible things.
Like those threads that hold a nation's story together.
Yes. And they found it woven into the very fabric of Rome, which I thought was really poetic.
It is, and it kind of makes you wonder, like, how is that connection to history fostered
I know.
and maintained over generations?
I know, right? Yeah, that's a great question. And then the author, they kind of dive into this a little deeper by referencing ancient Egypt
Great.
and their whole philosophy of as above, so below.
Right, right. Now, for someone like me who's not like a historian or anything, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Why are they bringing it up here?
Yeah, good question. So basically, as above, so below, it means that Egyptians believe that everything in the universe is connected,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And that to understand ourselves and our society,
Right.
we have to understand our place in that whole cosmic order, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So the author is kind of implying that this deep, like, philosophical understanding, right?
Mhm.
It's part of what contributed to the extraordinary longevity of Egyptian civilization,
Oh, interesting.
which, by the way, lasted for at least 5,000 years.
Wow. 5,000 years. That's almost impossible to imagine.
I know, right? And that's
I-
the point the author makes.
Yeah.
They even say, like, they contrast it with the United States.
Okay.
And they're like, it would take a miracle for the United States to last that long.
That's a bold statement.
Yeah, it is, right?
Yeah.
But I think it highlights, again, their yearning for that kind of enduring
Yeah.
national identity like they saw in Egypt.
Makes sense.
So, okay, how does all this tie back to Belgium
Right, right.
and the statue?
Yeah.
Well, this is where it takes a really interesting turn. The author, they talk about how they, after looking at Rome, after looking at Egypt, they're having trouble pinpointing, like, evidence of Belgian national identity.
Right.
And all they can really come up with is the feeling of the North Sea wind, which is beautiful,
Yeah.
but it's not very tangible.
No, it's not something you can like hold on to.
Right. Like, they totally get that,
Yeah.
searching for something concrete.
Absolutely. You want something to grasp.
Yeah. But then they bring up this film, Soundtrack for a Coup d'etat,
Okay.
which they consider to be like the most important Belgian film ever made.
Wow.
And they think it reveals a large-scale historical event that connects Belgium to the Cold War.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, right? And so they present it as this kind of hidden piece
Okay.
of the puzzle
Yeah.
of Belgian identity, a key to understanding something really significant about their past. you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Did they give any details about what this event might be?
Well, they only mention Khrushchev, the Soviet leader,
Mm.
and that whole shoe-banging incident at the UN,
Right, right.
but that's it. So clearly, the author sees this film as a window
Yeah,
into a critical moment in history, but they're being kind of mysterious about it.
yeah, they're leaving us hanging.
I know. Makes you want to watch the film right away, doesn't it?
It really does. Especially if it helps us understand this whole statue thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, this is even more interesting, what they took away from the film
Okay.
was the importance of, like, thinking for yourself.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know?
yeah,
Like, don't just blindly accept
yeah. Yeah.
the historical narratives that are presented to you.
Oh, that's such an important point. Yeah,
Right. We should always be questioning and, like, thinking critically.
absolutely. Especially about history, right?
Exactly.
Mm.
Especially about history. And, well, I'm super curious about this film and how it encourages that kind of thinking, you know?
Yeah, me too. It sounds like we need to learn more about the author's perspective on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it seems like they're advocating for a more nuanced view of history. Yeah.
Like a subversive one.
Right.
And they see this film as a good example of that.
Yeah, it makes me even more curious about this soundtrack for a coup d'etat.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating how a film can be like this gateway to understanding a country's identity.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. Do you think they're implying that there are like hidden truths about Belgium
Oh, possibly.
waiting to be discovered?
Yeah, like it sounds like this film really challenged their assumptions.
Right.
You know, maybe it revealed things about Belgian history they didn't know before.
Okay.
And it goes back to their point about questioning those established narratives.
Right, right,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's like they're urging us to become historical detectives,
Yes. Good.
piecing together clues, challenging conventional wisdom.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and it seems like their whole journey of discovery through this film, it's directly influencing their stance on the statue.
Okay.
They're saying the proposed additions lack boldness,
Right.
like a clear message that would resonate with people. Yeah, I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. It's
Yeah.
like they're drawing this parallel between their own experience of being challenged by the film
Right.
and what they think is missing from the artwork for the statue.
Exactly. Yeah. So what do they propose?
Well, they offer an alternative.
Okay.
Instead of those abstract additions, they say put up a statue of Patrice Lumumba,
Okay.
the Congolese independence leader,
Right.
and put it right across from Leopold II.
Oh, okay. To be honest, I need some more context here.
Sure.
Who was Patrice Lumumba, and why does the author see him as such a key figure?
So Patrice Lumumba was a really important person in the fight for Congolese independence from Belgium.
Okay.
He became the first prime minister of the newly independent Congo in 1960.
Oh, wow.
And he became a symbol of hope, of resistance,
Okay.
because he really advocated for his people, for free Congo.
I see. So putting his statue opposite Leopold II, that would be like a very deliberate statement.
Yeah, exactly. Because Leopold II, as King of Belgium during the late 19th and early 20th centuries,
Right.
he oversaw the colonization of the Congo,
Right.
which led to exploitation, the deaths of millions of Congolese people.
Right.
It's a dark part of Belgian history,
Yeah.
one that still causes debate today.
That makes sense why the author felt those proposed additions weren't enough.
Yeah,
They're calling for a more direct confrontation with the past.
exactly. The author really admires Lumumba's courage, his stand against colonialism,
Okay.
and they believe that honoring him this way would spark a much-needed conversation about Belgium's colonial legacy.
That's definitely a bold idea.
It is.
It makes you think about how we remember historical figures,
Yeah,
especially those with complicated legacies, right?
absolutely. And there's actually a pretty sad update to this.
What's that?
Lumumba's mausoleum was recently vandalized,
Oh, wow.
which adds another layer to this whole thing.
Yeah, that's really disheartening.
It is.
It shows these debates about history and memory, they have real consequences.
They do. It highlights how important it is to have these discussions with sensitivity
Right.
and with an open mind.
And a willingness to listen to other perspectives.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, hearing Lumumba's story, his connection to Leopold II, it makes me realize how interconnected history really is.
It is. We can't understand one without the other.
Yeah, and that's what's so compelling about the author's approach.
Right.
They're weaving together ancient Rome, ancient Egypt, a Cold War film,
Yeah.
colonialism, all to shed light on this debate about a statue
It's a reminder that history isn't just in the past.
Right.
It shapes who we are today.
and how we choose to remember it shapes our future, yeah.
Exactly.
But I'm still stuck on this film.
Okay.
How does it connect Belgium to the Cold War? And what does Khrushchev banging his shoe have to do with any of it?
Well, remember what the author said about independent thinking?
Yeah.
Maybe this film is pushing us to look deeper, to go beyond the surface and find out what really happened.
You're right. That's what makes this deep dive so cool.
It is.
It's not just about learning facts.
No,
It's about challenging ourselves to think differently about history
absolutely.
and maybe even uncover hidden truths.
Yeah, those things that have been overlooked.
Okay, I'm starting to get why this film is so important to their argument.
Yeah.
It represents this idea of questioning the narratives we've been given.
And finding unexpected connections between things that seem unrelated.
Right. It makes me think about that comparison to ancient Egypt.
Mm-hmm. That was a bold statement.
It was, but I'm starting to see it as more than just a provocation.
Okay.
It's a challenge to think about what makes a society last.
Right, those values and beliefs that contribute to a civilization's longevity.
Yeah, the Egyptians' connection to their environment, their sense of community.
Their reverence for their ancestors, their art, their architecture.
Right. Maybe by exploring those elements, we can learn something about the challenges we face today.
That's a great point.
I'm also curious about the author's struggle to find that tangible evidence of Belgian identity. They talked about the North Sea wind.
Yeah,
It's a beautiful image,
it is.
but they wanted something more concrete.
Right, and it seems like they found at least part of it in this film.
Yeah, and it's interesting to contrast that with the Romans
Yeah.
and how connected they were to their history.
They seem to carry it within them.
I wonder if the author's saying Belgium needs to rediscover its own story,
That's possible.
to find a way to connect its past to its present.
Yeah, to create a shared sense of national identity that resonates with people today.
Exactly, one that acknowledges both the good and the bad.
And maybe art can play a role in that.
Oh, absolutely.
The author's idea of a statue of Patrice Lumumba is a great example.
Right.
It shows how art can start a dialogue, challenge us, even be controversial.
It's a reminder that art isn't just about aesthetics.
No, it's about ideas, about meaning, about engaging with the world.
And sometimes about facing those uncomfortable truths.
Yeah, about ourselves and our history.
So about the author's idea for the Leopold II statue, what do you think would happen if they actually put a statue of Patrice Lumumba across from him?
That's tough to say.
Yeah,
It would definitely start a conversation, which is what the author wants.
right.
But whether it would lead to real understanding, to reconciliation with Belgium's colonial past, I don't know.
There's no easy answer when it comes to these complicated historical legacies, is there?
Not really. Every situation is different. What
Right.
matters is that we have these conversations thoughtfully,
Yeah.
respectfully, listening to each other, considering all sides.
It's about honoring the past without being trapped by it.
Yeah, I think the author would agree with that.
Okay.
They're not saying to erase history, to ignore the bad parts.
Right.
They're asking us to confront them, to learn from them.
And maybe even find some beauty and inspiration in unexpected places.
Like that Egyptian philosophy.
Yeah. As above, so below.
It's all connected, isn't it?
Yeah. That's what makes these deep dives so interesting.
For sure.
We start with one topic, and it leads us down all these paths.
And we always end up with more questions than answers.
But that's okay, right? The journey is just as important.
I think so.
So to our listeners, we leave you with this thought. How do you think societies should deal with controversial historical figures? Should we erase them? Contextualize them? Find other ways to engage with the past? There's no right or wrong answer.
But it's worth thinking about.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it feels like we've only just, scratched the surface of this whole thing.
Yeah, it is amazing how one article can lead to such a wide-ranging discussion.
We went from Austin to Rome to ancient Egypt, even touched on the Cold War.
And all the while, we're wrestling with these big questions. How do we understand history? How do we form our national identities? And how do we deal with these controversial figures from the past, like Leopold II?
It's a lot to take in, that's for sure. And I'm still really curious about this film, soundtrack for a coup d'etat.
Yeah, it seems to be really central to the author's argument.
Like it was a turning point for them.
Exactly. It's like it gave them this new lens to look at history through, where they started questioning everything.
You know what? I think we should do a deep dive on that film.
Oh, I like that idea.
Once we find a coffee, of course.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to see what we make of it.
But going back to the statue debate, I'm really struck by how the author uses these historical parallels.
Right.
They're bringing in ancient wisdom, like that Egyptian idea of as above, so below, to make their point.
It's smart. It adds a whole other dimension to their argument.
And it makes us think about the connections between past and present.
It is, yeah.
That comparison to Rome and how they had that shared civic pride.
Mm-hmm.
It really got me thinking about how we create those kinds of connections to our own history.
Yeah, how do we build that sense of shared identity? Is it something we can create on purpose, or does it just happen over time?
That's a great question. I don't know if there's an easy answer.
Probably not. It's probably a mix of things: culture, society, politics.
But it's worth thinking about because it seems like that's what the author was searching for, that feeling of belonging, of being part of something bigger than themselves.
Yeah, I think you're right. And maybe that's what this whole debate about the Leopold II statue is really about.
Okay.
It's not just about a piece of art, it's about how we come to terms with our past, the good and the bad.
And how we create a shared story for the future.
Exactly. And the author seems to be saying that we need to confront history head on, like they propose with the Lumumba statue.
I wonder, though, is there a way to bridge the gap between people who want to contextualize Leopold II
Right.
and those who think that's like condoning what he did?
That's the challenge, isn't it? And it's a debate happening everywhere as we try to figure out how to deal with colonialism, slavery, all those dark parts of history.
It feels like we're at this point where we have to decide, how are we going to remember our past?
Are we going to erase it, pretend it didn't happen,
Mm-hmm.
or find a way to acknowledge all of it?
It's a big decision, one with lasting consequences.
It is. But the important thing is to talk about it openly, to listen to each other.
Because really, these aren't just debates about statues or historical figures.
No, they're about who we are as a society, what we value.
Maybe by having these difficult conversations, we can start to create a better future.
Yeah, a future where everyone feels like they belong, like they're part of something bigger.
That's a good thought to end on. Thanks for taking this deep dive with me.
My pleasure. And to our listener, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep digging deeper, because as we've seen today, there's always more to discover.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening.